In a vast high-tech gym on an alien planet, a group of students was preparing for their daily training session. This gym, like many others, was designed with advanced technology, capable of creating a unique training environment for the alien species that came to hone their skills. From gravity fields that could be adjusted to simulate different worlds to obstacle courses that defied the laws of physics, everything in this gym was built to push the limits of the students' strength, agility, and endurance. The atmosphere was electric, filled with eager anticipation and the hum of machinery as the students prepared for their next challenge. The students here were unlike any other. They were from different corners of the galaxy, each with their own unique species, skills, and abilities. Some were tall and muscular, their bodies built for power. Others were smaller but faster, their agility their greatest weapon. All of them had trained for years to reach the level of skill required to attend this elite academy. Today, they had gathered together, as they did every day, to test themselves against each other and the gym's difficult obstacles. But today felt different. In the corner of the gym, a group of students, all humanoid aliens with purple skin and long flowing hair, were stretching and talking amongst themselves. They were confident, as they had always been. Their species was known for their intelligence and strength, and they had always dominated every challenge in the gym. "Today is going to be easy," said one of the students, a tall, confident alien named Zorith. "I've trained for this moment. No one can beat me." His voice was full of arrogance, and his friends laughed along with him. "Don't be so sure," another student, Chris, said with a smile. Chris was smaller than Zorith, but his speed was unmatched. He had earned a reputation for taking down larger opponents with sheer agility and quick thinking. "You might just meet someone today who's better than you." Zorith snorted. "Better than me? Impossible." The rest of the students chuckled at Zorith's overconfidence, but none of them took the threat seriously. After all, they had all fought against each other before, and no one had ever come close to beating Zorith. He was the best in the gym, and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, across the room, a few students of a different species, with scales covering their bodies and sharp claws, were preparing for their own practice session. These creatures, called the Gorons, were known for their brutal fighting skills and terrifying strength. However, they lacked the finesse of the other species. Their strength was unrivaled, but their tactics were often too direct and predictable. Even so, their intimidating appearance made many of the other students wary of crossing them. One Goron named Ruck was preparing for a sparring match with his partner, a female Goron named Sa. "Ready for this, Sa?" Ruck growled, his sharp teeth gleaming as he cracked his knuckles. "I've been waiting for a real challenge." Sa, with a slight smirk, glanced at him. "We'll see if you can keep up with me today, Ruck. I've been practicing." "Ha, we'll see," Ruck replied confidently. The two Gorons squared off, their muscles rippling as they began their intense sparring. The sound of their blows echoed through the gym, a reminder to all of the raw power they possessed. Meanwhile, a few others stood nearby, watching the Gorons in awe. The gym had witnessed many fierce battles, but the Gorons' sparring sessions were always something to behold. Their fighting style was chaotic and brutal, relying on pure physical power and aggression. For most, it was a spectacle of raw strength and ferocity, but the other students were not fooled. They knew that in a real fight, the Gorons would be a serious threat. But as intense as the Gorons' sparring sessions were, today's atmosphere was different. The air felt charged, almost as if the gym itself was anticipating something big. The students couldn't quite put their finger on it, but they all felt it. The usual confidence in the air was tainted with a hint of unease. For the first time in a long while, the gym felt tense. A young alien, barely old enough to be training here, watched nervously from the sidelines. His name was Vorn, and he was a species known for their quick reflexes and extraordinary mental abilities. Vorn had only just arrived at the academy and was still learning the ropes, but he was already starting to understand the gravity of the situation. He watched as the more experienced students, the ones he had looked up to, seemed unusually on edge today. It was as though they knew something he didn't. Something was coming, and none of them knew what it was. Vorn's instructor, a stern alien named Nyx, approached him. Nyx was known for her strict but fair teaching methods. She had trained many of the best students in the gym, and she was respected by all for her strength and intellect. "You're nervous, aren't you?" she asked him, her eyes narrowing as she read his expression. Vorn nodded slowly. "I don't know what it is, but something feels different today." Nyx looked around the room, her sharp eyes scanning every corner. She had been training for longer than Vorn had been alive, and she had seen many things, many battles, many victories, and many defeats. But today, even she felt a strange unease. There was a sense that something was coming, something she couldn't predict. "I've been feeling it too," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "There's a change in the air. Something is about to happen." As the gym continued to buzz with activity, the students could sense it, but they didn't yet know what it was. Their instincts told them that something was coming. A storm of sorts, though they didn't know how or when it would hit. Just as the students were beginning to settle into their training routine, the gym doors suddenly slid open with a loud mechanical hiss. The sound was sharp, slicing through the quiet buzz of the gym. It was not the normal sound of the instructor walking in or the entrance of a new student. It was something different, something that demanded attention. A figure stood in the doorway. The students froze. The figure in the doorway was unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was a human, a species that the aliens had always regarded as weak and insignificant. But this human, this figure, was different. His posture was confident, yet calm, and his eyes seemed to pierce through the crowd as if he could see every one of them for what they truly were. His name was known to them only through whispers, rumors that travel through the galaxy. He was called the Deathworlder, and his kind hailed from a planet so dangerous, so filled with creatures that could tear apart any being that dared to land there, that even the bravest of aliens feared it. The room was silent. The students exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to make of this unexpected arrival. Was this human here to challenge them, to fight them, or was this some kind of mistake? The instructor, Nyx, stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the human before her. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with suspicion. The Deathworlder didn't respond immediately. He simply stepped further into the room, his presence alone demanding attention. His eyes scanned the gym, taking in the students who now stood frozen in place, unsure of what to do. Then, after what felt like an eternity of silence, he spoke, his voice calm and measured, yet carrying the weight of authority. "I'm here for a lesson." The words hit the students like a punch to the stomach. What could a human possibly teach them? They were the strongest, the fastest, the most skilled beings in the galaxy. No one could challenge them. No one, except this human. And with that, the gym's atmosphere changed once again. The calm that had existed just moments before was gone, replaced by a quiet tension. The storm had arrived. The gym fell into a heavy, unnatural silence as the Deathworlder stepped further into the room. His mere presence radiated a kind of primal energy, something that sent shivers down the spines of even the most battle-hardened alien students. Each of them stood frozen, as if the air had thickened with tension, suffocating them with the unknown. Nyx, the stern instructor, was the first to break the silence. "What is it you want, human?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with a hint of curiosity. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the Deathworlder. She could sense something different about him, something far beyond what any of her students had ever encountered. The Deathworlder didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slowly surveyed the gym. His gaze seemed to pierce through each student, reading them, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, all without a single word. He didn't need to say anything because his presence alone spoke volumes. The gym was his domain now. The aliens were no longer in control. After what felt like an eternity, the Deathworlder's lips parted. "I'm here to show you what true strength is." The words hung in the air, reverberating off the walls. It wasn't a challenge. It was a declaration. The students, from the Gorons to the humanoid aliens, all felt a sinking feeling in their stomachs. No one had ever spoken to them like that. No one had ever been so bold. And the unsettling truth was that they weren't sure they could do anything about it. Without another word, the Deathworlder reached behind his back and effortlessly pulled out a sleek, advanced weapon, something none of the students had seen before. Its design was foreign, sleek, and almost elegant in its simplicity. It hummed with a quiet, dangerous energy. His fingers danced along the weapon's surface, as though it were an extension of himself. The students exchanged uneasy glances, wondering if this was the moment they were going to have to defend themselves. Nyx, ever the calm and collected leader, took a step forward. "If you think you can intimidate us with your toys, you're mistaken. We don't fight with weapons here. We fight with skill and strength." She stood tall, confident in her abilities. After all, she was the instructor. She was the best. And she wasn't about to let this human challenge her authority. The Deathworlder's lips twitched into the slightest of smiles. It was a smile filled with knowledge and experience. He wasn't here to engage in petty brawls, and he certainly wasn't intimidated by their threats. "You misunderstand me," he said softly, his voice like a low rumble of thunder. "I'm not here to use weapons against you. I'm here to teach you how to face a world where weapons are everything." Before anyone could respond, he suddenly moved. It was so fast, so sudden, that the entire gym seemed to gasp in unison. In one fluid motion, the Deathworlder had closed the distance between him and the nearest student, a Goron named Ruck, who had been standing near the edge of the gym. Ruck barely had time to react. His claws extended, and his mouth opened in a primal roar as he lunged at the human. But it was too late. With a smooth, almost imperceptible shift, the Deathworlder dodged Ruck's attack, his movements so swift and precise that they seemed to defy the laws of physics. Ruck's claws swiped through thin air where the Deathworlder had just been standing, and before the Goron could recover, the human's hand shot out, grabbing Ruck by the wrist with an iron grip. In that split second, the gym watched in stunned silence as the Deathworlder effortlessly twisted Ruck's arm behind his back and shoved him to the ground. The impact was deafening, the sound of metal hitting the floor echoing throughout the gym. Ruck struggled to break free, but the Deathworlder had already pinned him down. Ruck's struggles were futile. The room was still. The students couldn't believe what they had just seen. Ruck, the strongest of the Gorons, the one who had made many of them tremble in fear, had been taken down so easily. Nyx was the first to recover. She stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she addressed the Deathworlder. "You're fast, but this is no game. We're not children here." The Deathworlder didn't respond with words. Instead, he slowly released Ruck, letting him scramble to his feet. Ruck's eyes burned with anger and humiliation, but he was no fool. He knew better than to challenge someone who could move like that. He stood back, growling in frustration, but the human's eyes never left him. The Deathworlder took a few steps back and then turned to face the other students, his eyes sweeping over the room like a predator sizing up its prey. "This is how it's going to go," he said, his voice unwavering. "I'm not here to make you my enemies. I'm here to make you understand what true power is. Power doesn't come from strength alone. It comes from speed, precision, and the ability to think beyond brute force." As if on cue, one of the humanoid students, Zoreth, the same one who had been boasting earlier, stepped forward, his fists clenched, his confidence brimming once more. "Enough of this. You're just a human. What could you possibly know about true strength?" The Deathworlder looked at Zoreth, the barest hint of a smile curling his lips. He didn't respond with words, but instead with action. Zorath charged at him, his massive frame surging forward with a speed that could rival any of the aliens present. His fists came at the Deathworlder with a force capable of smashing through walls. He aimed for the human's head, determined to put an end to this humiliation once and for all. But once again, the Deathworlder moved with lightning speed, sidestepping the punch with ease. Zorath's momentum carried him forward, and in that split second, the Deathworlder seized the opportunity. He reached out and placed a single hand on Zorath's shoulder, then, in one fluid motion, spun him around and hurled him to the ground with an effortless throw. Zorath crashed into the floor with a resounding thud, the wind knocked out of him. The entire gym watched in stunned disbelief. Zorath, the proud and powerful alien, had been defeated as easily as Ruck had. "Strength doesn't mean anything if you don't know how to use it," the Deathworlder said, his voice calm and collected. "It's not about how strong you are. It's about how fast you think, how fast you move, and how well you adapt when the odds are against you." The gym was in shock. The alien students had never seen anything like this before. Their entire world had been turned upside down in the span of mere minutes. They had prided themselves on their strength, their training, their power. But now, they were faced with a reality they couldn't ignore. There was a being in front of them who was faster, stronger, and more skilled than any of them. The Deathworlder's eyes swept over the room, watching as the students scrambled to regain their composure. They were no longer so confident. They had seen what he was capable of, and now they realized they were facing a challenge unlike any other. Nyx took a step back, her expression unreadable. She was an instructor, a warrior, and a strategist, but even she couldn't deny the skill and power the Deathworlder had shown. There was no arrogance in his movements, no boastfulness. He was simply superior. "Are you done yet?" the Deathworlder asked, his voice laced with amusement. "Or should I continue showing you how far beyond you I am?" No one answered. They couldn't, because they knew, deep down, that he was right. The gym's atmosphere had changed. The once loud and bustling space now felt stifling, as if a dark cloud had settled over it. The students, once confident in their abilities, now stood in stunned silence, each of them struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The Deathworlder, a human from a planet of unimaginable danger, had destroyed their sense of security in mere moments. He had not only defeated the strongest of the Gorons and the boastful Zorath, but he had done so with ease, as though their power and skill meant nothing to him. His display of speed, precision, and strength had shattered their belief that no one could surpass them. No one spoke for several long moments. The gym was still. The sounds of movement, laughter, and banter were gone. The students, alien and human alike, stood in their places, unsure of how to react. The Deathworlder was still in the center of the gym, his calm demeanor unshaken by the spectacle he had just caused. He looked around at the students, waiting for their next move, but none of them made a sound. Nyx, the instructor, was the first to speak. Her voice, though steady, held a note of uncertainty. "You've made your point," she said, her eyes narrowing as she studied the human. "But you can't just come into our gym and destroy everything we've built. You've broken the rules. We train here. We don't fight like this." The Deathworlder's lips curled slightly. "Rules," he said, his voice low and full of meaning. "You think your rules matter on a planet where survival is the only rule. I didn't come here to break your rules. I came here to show you that survival is not a matter of following rules. It's a matter of adapting to the world you're in, no matter what that world throws at you." His words hung in the air like a weight, heavy and ominous. The students shifted uneasily, and a few exchanged nervous glances. There was something about the way he spoke, something that made them feel small, insignificant, even though they had spent their entire lives training for moments like these. "Survival," Nyx repeated, as though tasting the word for the first time. She paused, her mind racing. "So you think you can teach us something? You think you're better than us because you come from a dangerous world?" The Deathworlder didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room once again, assessing each of them. "I didn't come here to prove that I'm better than you. I came here to prove that none of you are prepared for what comes next." The words hit like a punch. There was a subtle power behind them, an unspoken warning. The Deathworlder's confidence was unlike anything the students had ever seen. But it wasn't arrogance. It was a deep, unshakable certainty that came from having survived in the most unforgiving world imaginable. The Deathworlder had seen death, destruction, and chaos on a level the students could not even fathom. And yet, here he stood, a mere human, unbothered and unfazed by the strength of an entire gym full of powerful aliens. The tension in the room thickened. The students shifted nervously, their once confident postures now betraying their fear. Some tried to stand tall, but the spark of uncertainty in their eyes was clear. They had been trained to fight and survive. Yes, but this was something they were not prepared for. This was a being who operated on a different level, a level they had never encountered before. It was as if the laws of strength, speed, and combat that they had spent their entire lives mastering had suddenly been rewritten in front of their eyes. The Gorons, the most fearsome of them all, were the first to falter. Ruck, who had been thrown to the ground with ease by the Deathworlder just moments ago, now stood at the edge of the gym, his eyes wide and his posture tense. He had always prided himself on his physical strength, his ability to dominate in battle. But now, in the face of the Deathworlder, he felt small, helpless. His muscles, once a source of confidence, now felt useless. Sa, the female Goron who had been sparring with Ruck earlier, looked at him and then at the others. Her sharp, reptilian eyes were full of confusion and fear. She had seen her fellow Goron's strength broken in an instant, and now she wondered how long it would take before the Deathworlder turned his attention to her. She was fast, yes, but so was he, and she had no idea what kind of moves he was capable of. "Is this what you call strength?" Ruck growled, his voice thick with frustration. "You think this human can teach us anything?" Sud didn't respond. She couldn't. What was there to say? Ruck had been knocked out cold by this human, and yet he was standing here, still defiant, still trying to convince himself that he wasn't afraid. Zoreth, who had been humiliated moments ago, slowly picked himself up from the floor. His pride had been shattered, and with it, his confidence. He had never been defeated so easily. He had never been outclassed like that. He had always been the strongest, the fastest, the best. But now he was beginning to doubt everything he had believed. Was he really the best, or had he been living in an illusion of his own making? His gaze flicked to the Deathworlder, who stood in the center of the gym, watching him with calm, unblinking eyes. Zoreth felt his heart pound in his chest. He had to do something. He couldn't stand there, defeated and broken, in front of everyone. But what could he do? He had seen firsthand how easily the Deathworlder had taken him down. He was nothing compared to him. Zoreth began, but his voice faltered. He couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. There was no point. There was no point in fighting anymore. The Deathworlder had proved that they weren't the strongest. He was. Nyx, sensing the shift in the room, stepped forward once again. "Enough," she said, her voice firm. "We are not weak. We are not afraid." But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were hollow. She had been a leader, a warrior, and a strategist, but nothing in her training had prepared her for the reality of what the Deathworlder represented. She had seen the other students falter, seen them shake with fear, and she knew, deep down, that if she didn't do something soon, she would be next. She looked around at her students, trying to muster the confidence they once had, but it was clear. The panic was starting to spread. It was infectious. It was impossible to ignore, and there was no hiding from the truth that had been laid bare in front of them. The Deathworlder was a threat unlike anything they had ever encountered. He wasn't just strong, he was intelligent. He wasn't just fast, he was strategic. He didn't rely on brute force or overwhelming numbers. He relied on the one thing that had always been the most important factor in survival, the will to adapt. And no matter how much training they had, no matter how powerful they were, none of them could adapt fast enough to beat him. The gym was filled with a growing sense of panic. Students who had once stood tall and proud now seemed unsure of themselves and unsure of what to do next. Their strength, their skill, their power, it meant nothing in the face of the Deathworlder's calm, effortless superiority. And the worst part, they couldn't escape. The doors were locked. They were trapped in this gym with the one being who could destroy them all in an instant. The Deathworlder wasn't here to fight. They were here to teach them a lesson. But the lesson was becoming clearer with each passing second. No matter how strong they were, they would never be able to survive in the galaxy if they didn't understand what true power really meant. The panic began to spread, slow at first, but then with increasing speed. The gym, once a place of pride and training, had turned into a cage. The students felt like prey, each of them wondering if they would be the next to face the Deathworlder's overwhelming strength. And the Deathworlder, he simply watched, waiting for the inevitable. The gym, once filled with confidence and laughter, now felt like a hollow, suffocating place. The students, each from different corners of the galaxy, were no longer the proud warriors they had once been. They were unsure, rattled by what they had just witnessed. Fear had crept into their hearts, something they had never expected to feel. The Deathworlder had torn apart their sense of invincibility with effortless ease, and now they were left standing in a silent, tense room, each of them grappling with the realization that they were not as powerful as they had once believed. Nyx, the instructor, was the first to recover from the shock. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had seen many battles in her life, but nothing like this. Nothing that had made her feel so utterly outmatched. But she was an instructor, a leader, and she couldn't let her fear show. She had to maintain control. She had to keep her students in check, even if she didn't know how to handle this situation. "Enough," Nyx finally said, her voice ringing out in the silence. Her eyes were hard as she looked at the Deathworlder. "You've proved your point. You've beaten us. Now, tell us what you want from us. Why are you here?" The Deathworlder didn't respond immediately. He stood in the center of the gym, his calm demeanor unchanged by the chaos around him. He had proven his superiority, but he wasn't here for a fight. He wasn't here to destroy them. He was here to teach them something. Slowly, he walked to the center of the gym, where the students stood in a loose circle around him. He could see the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty. He could hear their hearts racing, their breath shallow. He could feel the tension in the air. It was palpable, almost suffocating. These were powerful beings who had spent their entire lives training for moments like these. But now, they were broken. "Do you understand why I'm here?" The Deathworlder's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, something that made the students uneasy. "I didn't come to fight you. I didn't come to destroy you. I came here to show you something far more important than strength." The students exchanged glances. They were still reeling from the brutal display of power they had just witnessed. None of them could quite grasp the idea that this human, this Deathworlder, was trying to teach them something. How could someone so much weaker than them in terms of physical ability be teaching them a lesson? "I came here to show you that true power doesn't come from muscle or brute strength," the Deathworlder continued. "It doesn't come from how many enemies you can defeat or how much damage you can do. True power comes from the mind. It comes from the ability to adapt, to understand your surroundings, and to make the most of the resources you have. It comes from surviving when it seems impossible. It comes from knowing that no matter how strong you are, there is always someone, somewhere, who can defeat you if you're not careful." Zorath, who had been standing in the back, still bruised from his defeat, scoffed under his breath. "You're telling us that power isn't about strength. That's preposterous. We've trained our entire lives to be the strongest. Our muscles, our abilities, our combat skills. Those are what make us powerful. The Deathworlder looked at Zorith, his gaze steady, unblinking. That's where you're wrong, Zorith, he said, his voice low but firm. Strength is only one piece of the puzzle, but it's not the most important piece. The strongest person is not always the one who survives. The one who survives is the one who can adapt, who can think, who can survive in any environment, no matter how hostile it is. The room was quiet for a moment as the students processed his words. They had always believed that strength was everything. It was the foundation of their training, the core of their identity. But now, standing in front of this human who had defeated them all, they were starting to question everything they had ever known. "Do you understand now?" the Deathworlder asked. "You've spent so much time focusing on strength and power, but you've neglected your minds. You've neglected your ability to think, to survive in ways that don't rely solely on physical force."